So it's one of the things that we talk to leaders about all the time, and that has been just like critically important for me to remember as we grow our business. It's a principle: language creates culture. Right? The things that you say as a team over and over and over again create the culture that your team, and in some ways even your customers, live out. So as a leader, like, you do yourself and your team a great favor when you put on the hat of CRO, right? Chief Repeating Officer. And so in some ways, that's kind of what we're diving into here today, is like, we've now been in business for 5 years, and there are certain phrases that have cascaded not even just into our team. Like, our team knows these phrases by heart, right? Because we've said them over and over and over again. But what's crazy is there are some of our customers now that are leading businesses around the country that are actively and intentionally using these phrases with their teams. And like, I'll meet people for the first time and they'll tell me one of these phrases. I'll be like, and they'll act like it's their quote. And I'm thrilled about that, right? Like, because that's language creates culture. So in some ways, we just wanted to create, as we're launching this YouTube channel, just a repository of some of the core phrases that are bigger than just phrases. These represent fundamental, foundational beliefs of the mission that we're on as a company. And that's really important for us to focus on early, because beliefs drive behavior. So the things we do, they are all in some way inextricably interconnected into these beliefs. And if people are interested in what Path for Growth is and what we do and the mission that we're on and the people that we serve, like, these beliefs are a great place to start.
When did you first realize how important language was?
Oh gosh, I have loved language for a long time. Like, I don't know if I've told you this story before, but I literally remember I was sitting on my mom's bed. I was in second grade, sitting on my mom's bed while she was folding laundry. And I was just like shooting the breeze, and like, literally, she was folding laundry. And I said, Mom, when I grow up, I don't think I want to be a motivational speaker, but I would love to be a motivational teacher one day. And she looked at me, she's like, what? Like, go play outside. Like, what are you talking about? Right. But I say all that to say, like, not that it's been at the forefront of my mind all the time, but the topic of intentional and effective communication as a means and vehicle for intentional, effective leadership has been something that I've had in the back of my head for a very, very long time. Fast forward, I saw this really modeled in two places. Number one is in college, I was the drum major for the Longhorn Band, which the Longhorn Band is the show band of the Southwest, people. Hook 'em horns. What starts here changes the world, right? 400-person organization, one of the most, honestly, revered marching band programs in the country. And you have a single drum major that is the liaison between staff and students, that is the primary student leader of the organization. Incredible opportunity. Absurdly impressive organization with a massive history and tradition. And what was so cool that I didn't know I was learning this at the time, but being in Longhorn Band and observing the inner workings of that organization with, decades, if not a century of tradition, what you saw is years and years and years of language, right? When I said same thing, like, we're going to run a drill again, everyone would say, same thing, mo better, right? Like, everyone would say that. And like, we had all these things that we would say that we're going to beat the hell out of A&M, right? But then we're not going to beat the hell out of Baylor, because Baylor is a Christian school. So we're going to beat the hell into Baylor is what we're going to do, right? Language that creates culture, right? I could list so many different things that literally would sound like we're talking a different language, but in many ways, it was like this giant inside joke that everyone knew. And so I saw it there first, and then went and worked for an organization called Spur Leadership that was associated with Lake Hills Church in Austin, Texas after that. And one of the things that Lake Hills did extremely well is they codified their core values, which is what you stand for, and they used that language over and over and over again. And we knew the mission of this place is to grow the community of Christ one life at a time. And it's like, I still have that mission memorized. That's crazy. I worked there over 10 years ago. And so again, you created a culture, shared values and behaviors of a team by reinforcing the language that brought people together. And then certainly saw it at Ramsey. Ramsey is like a master class and just listen to Dave on the radio for 3 hours a day, by the way. And I mean, you hear him say so many of the same things over and over again. And now it's like a meme. It's like an ism that people say his things to him before he can say it to them. And like, they like love it. They love that stuff, right? Language creates culture.
That reminds me a lot of in boot camp. When
is this Coast Guard boot camp?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So when you, I just remember like when I first went to the recruiter and I got my ship date, which was a couple months out from when I first interacted with the recruiter, they give you this little handbook, and it's like it's the Coast Guard's handbook, and you have to memorize a bunch of the language in it. You have to memorize, there's like standard orders you have to memorize. And then when you're at boot camp as well, one of the disciplinary actions you have is they have this huge book that's like the Coast Guard manual, and you would hold the book out in front of you at arm's length for like a ridiculous amount of time, and you just repeat the same phrase, reading the same page over and over and over and over and over again. And that's just what I think of when it's like, oh yeah, repeated language drives culture. It's like, I mean, yeah, in a big way. I probably, if you started some sentences to those pages, I could probably just rattle off the rest of what
for sure is. I mean, what I think of when you say that is that needs to be in Path for Growth's onboarding process. Is people stand with a book out in front of them while their arms are shaking.
We're going to stand for 30 minutes with the book out in front of you.
In some ways too, I also think like this podcast could also be called like The Nerd and the Jock, because Alex shows up with his marching band stories and Ben shows up with his Coast Guard boot camp stories, but different perspectives.
There we go. Yeah. We'll have ChatGPT make a meme of that.
There you go.
So you have these, 5 tenets or 5 principles. What's the first one?
Let's highlight too, like these are not things that we just wrote down and we're like, that sounds good. Let's go with that. Like, I think every single one of these, there was almost like a methodology that went into it becoming the thing that was repeated. Number one, it stuck because it had resonance with real life. So like when we recognized this principle or this phrase, we were like, man, we're going to grab onto that and we're going to remember that because we feel like it describes not only what we see in our business and leadership in life, but it describes what we see in other people's business leadership in life. And then really how we take that and then we distill it down into the list of 5 that we're going to share in this episode is we kind of said, okay, what are the things that we are saying over and over and over again? And the reason why we're saying it over and over and over again is not just because it sticks with us internally. It has found a home in people's businesses, leadership, and life externally. Like these are the things that when people call me after listening to our podcast for years, they can quote them back to me. And oftentimes you can learn a lot about what is true by seeing what do people respond to and what's the language they latch on to. And so some of these are quotes that I've heard over the years, which I'm going to do my best to give good attribution. Some of them are things that we've observed, and some of them are directly connected to stories of building this business. So with that, can we jump into number 1?
Yeah.
So number 1, let's tell the story behind it first. There's 5 of these that we're going to go through. Number 1, I had started the business, which we tell the whole story, maybe not the whole story, but some of the story in the previous episode about making the decision to leave Ramsey and start the business. And one of the things that I shared in that first episode that we recorded was, if you're not careful, you can spend so much time preparing for the worst case scenario that you don't ever spend any time asking, well, what if the best case scenario happens and how are we going to handle that? And that's where we were in the business. And so 6 months in, my one-on-one docket was filled. We were staffing growth groups and Olivia was running growth groups. Our team was already bigger than what I had anticipated it being. And we were getting more demand every single day. And beyond that, like we had office hours that were going on. We were talking about launching new products. We had just put out the idea of having our first in-person experiences. My mind was on who we were going to hire and when we were going to hire them. And like, if you had asked me at that time, like, how are things going? My honest answer would have been like, things are going great. This is just awesome, right? And, fast forward to November of 2020. So started in June. We're now at November of 2020. And this is a wild story that could be a huge tangent. We won't go on the full tangent, but I got invited to go on a trip to Richard Branson's private island. Unbelievable, right? And actually, like, through a whole series of decisions and circumstances, like was planning to go there, but then made the decision like, no, I don't need to be going to that right now. So now I've got like a week open. And I've already planned not to be working. And this is my first time off since we started the business. And I said, I'm just going to go down and still go to the beach. It's not going to be a private island, but I'm going to go to Panama City, Florida, and just like almost find some solitude. And I felt like hungry for some solitude in some ways because we run a very relational business. And although I'm a very relational person, I'm an introvert, right? And I recharge, refuel by being by myself. And so was really excited about going down to Panama City. And I'll never forget, like I had made the whole plan with my assistant to like be off, cleared the calendar, all of that, and got there in the condo in Panama City and put my computer and my phone under a pillow in the like guest bedroom. And like I was going to be off. And I did all of that. And then I just remember like sitting down and I'm in this beautiful place. I'm at the beach, right? There's great restaurants in walking distance. And I'm just like sitting there and I like can't breathe. And it's in that context of like not being able to breathe that like it hits me like I have been on for 6 months. Like I have forgotten how to turn things off. And, you know, I wish I could say like that 4 days was like this incredible time off where I was at the beach and I got to hit restore and refresh and find my creativity again, find passion. I was anxious the entire time, right? And for me, it was this wake up call of like, man, this thing has been growing, but just because it's been growing doesn't mean that it's healthy and doesn't mean that I'm healthy. And what had really been happening is my stress level had been growing proportional to the rate of our business. And so the bigger our business got, the more stressed I became. And I like, praise God, truly, I mean that. Because if I didn't end up on this beach house by myself, I'm not sure I would have recognized this. Like, if you extrapolate that out 2 years, I realized like, this thing is going to kill me, or I'm not going to want to do this anymore. And so it was, I did not have answers, but I did have questions. I said like, this cannot be the way to do this. I refuse to have my stress level grow proportional to the rate of my business till the end of time. We are going to do something different. And it was out of that the mantra that I just started saying over and over again to myself, but also to our customers, is health and growth are not the same thing. And it's wild, but I think we actually confuse that. Like we think, oh, well, you're growing, so you must be healthy. Not what I've seen, right? Everyone says if you're not growing, you're dying. We like to sound real tough when we say it, right? Well, what I have learned is just because you're growing doesn't mean you're living. And I unfortunately have met a lot of people, and I also know a lot of businesses that they're growing. On the external, everything's up and to the right, but just inside, they're just as dead as those that aren't. And so what I constantly have to remind myself, but we're also reminding our team, we're also reminding the business owners and the leaders that we work with every single day is just because you're growing doesn't mean you're living. It's possible to practice healthy growth. The thing that I know to be true, though, is that it never happens accidentally. It always happens because someone decided to exercise extreme, uncommon, unprecedented intentionality.
Well, so once you had that realization, how did that play out practically?
Yeah. Well, I had to figure out how to breathe again, first of all, like, you know, and I mean, honestly, like I was a little bit scared because I was like, well, this is what I've been doing is working really hard and keeping up with the pace of demand. And I feel like that's the right thing. And if that results in this stress level, well, then what am I supposed to do? Right. And so really, it didn't start with a bunch of answers. Like I already said, it started with a bunch of questions. And I started to turn on my radar for people that were growing, that were successful, that were creating jobs, that were acquiring new customers, that were moving forward in business and leadership and in life. But not only were they successful externally, they like loved their life, right? And they were like content where they were joyful where they were. Their spouse loved them and they had like a relationship that seemed admirable. They had like a really incredible relationship with their kids. And it just seemed like they were becoming more of the person, the man, the woman, the leader, the Christ follower, the business owner that they wanted to become. And the business was every day becoming more and more of what it was supposed to be, not like becoming a shadow of itself or something you're not proud of. And so I started to pay attention and look for those. And the first thing I noticed was that's incredibly rare. Like you can find a lot of people that are growing. You can find a lot of people that are happy. It's hard to find people that are happy and growing, right? And so, but when I found them, I was like, that's my person. And I would zoom in and I thought of those people as like lights, right? Like lights. And like, let's zoom in and let's look at the light. And I mean, honestly, it started as me and then it became our company. We started studying these people and we said, not only is this how we want to do business, we want to do business this way. And then in the process of doing business this way, we want to train, teach, coach other leaders on how to do business this way. And that's where like healthy growth became one of the things that we're known for. And we knew we had something when on our community office hours calls, I'd hear Naftali, or I'd hear Karen, or I'd hear Clint, or I'd hear Justin, or you can name any number of our first customers. And they'd say, well, I know a lot of people would do something this way, but I'm focused on healthy growth. And that was when we were like, bingo, that's the language. Health and growth are not the same thing. We are going to create and craft a community that is focused on practicing healthy growth.
If you could boil down like what it takes to practice healthy growth into one statement, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. You know, you can really look at this through the business lens, which is really what we do within our coaching program, right? And we don't have one statement. We have 12 fundamentals that we walk people through methodically on how to install this paradigm into their business at every level. But if we were to zoom back from just business ownership and let's just say life, like you want to be a person that practices healthy growth, here's what I would say is, can you be someone that experiences contentment, joy, and gratitude in the present while being zealful and passionate and adventurous in the way you faithfully move towards the future? And I think that's healthy growth, right? I see a lot of people that are extremely growth-oriented and goal-oriented, and they're miserable. Some of the most miserable people I know are the most goal-oriented people that I know. Right. But then I also see some people that they call it contentment. And in reality, you called attention to this the other day in a meeting. It's like you're confusing contentment with complacency, right? And you've stopped moving forward. You're not looking ahead towards anything and you're not expanding in service of others. What's crazy is like, man, if you can manage the tension, and that's what I think it is. It's not, I haven't figured out how to solve for it, but if you can manage the tension of like, I'm going to be joyful and content today while also hopefully and faithfully looking forward to tomorrow and growing into who I'm called to be, I think you nailed it at that point.
So what's the second one?
Okay. The second one I actually think is a little bit of a practical dive into the idea of healthy growth. And really it's a conversation about order of operations, because the second one is this phrase: if you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. The first time I ever said that, I'm pretty sure it was like to myself in a proverbial mirror, like saying like, Alex, like you got to start with you. But that's not what we so often do. What we so often do, and I think we actually have good intentions at doing it, and you can just as easily substitute career for business, right? As we say, I need to get stuff right at work, right? I need to make sure this business is operating correctly. I need to get sales to a certain point. I need to solve these customer issues or solve these team member issues, right? I need to get to a certain point out in my work world. And when I do that, then I'll have time to focus more on the things in and related to self-control, right? In and related to my own personal health, my own personal fitness, my spiritual life, my relationship with my spouse, even, or my relationship with my kids. And in me saying that, you can probably hear how faulty and screwed up that is. Because I have never once in all of my time working with business leaders seen a frantic, feeble, frazzled, weak person lead a healthy, centered, stable, strong business. I've never seen it, right? And like, I'm not putting my money on you being the first, right? Conversely, though, I have absolutely seen healthy, centered, stable, strong people go into work. And even if the work is frazzled, if it's crazy, if it's all on fire, they are the type of person that can actually lead in that situation and introduce order and stability and clarity and direction. And so that's why I think this is so important, is it operates counter to our primary impulse, because our first impulse is typically like, I need to go focus on all those things out there, and then I'll have time to shore up my relationship with God or to make sure that I'm physically healthy and well. So just the fundamental thing that we've said over and over again in our coaching program, that we have literally built out our Path for Growth fundamentals around this in terms of how we coach people, is if you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. Put some modicum of order in your personal life so that you can be the type of person that can do that in your business.
I once heard someone say, like, you shouldn't look for purpose in your work. You should bring purpose to your work. Kind of that idea of putting the cart before the horse.
And I think that actually connects to one of the other statements that we're going to go on to too. But it's wild. I think a lot of people maybe even start their businesses as a business owner. And certainly there was some of this in me, right? Where it's like, I'm going to work every single day asking the question, who am I? And your work is not where you're supposed to go to get the answer to that question, right? Like, go to your relationship with your Heavenly Father for your identity, for your value, for your worth. And out of that, like, let work be the overflow of you putting your life in order. The thing that I want to really highlight for people, though, on this is what I'm not talking about here is that you need to be a personal growth world beater to go do good work. Right. And we live in a time where we see everyone's best example and highlight reel of their ideal morning routine on Instagram. Right. And we're like trying to figure out, like, how long will this tub of water stay cold for if I go buy a bag of ice every morning and put it in there? It's like, we're trying to like figure out cold plunging. And it's like, maybe you don't need to do cold plunge just yet. Maybe just start opening the Bible for 5 minutes every morning and don't underestimate the value of small things done consistently. So don't say, man, before I go do good work or start working on my business, or, your business demands your stewardship. So I'm not saying you need to like become an Ironman triathlete, do cold plunge every morning, and become a theologian overnight before you can work on your business. What I am saying is introduce some modicum of base level standard of order in your personal life. This is why in our coaching, we challenge people, establish one high return habit, because we can read all the science on habits and recognize that keystone habits are these things that like they carry disproportionate weight, right? Which means the activity itself has ramifications for things that look nothing like the activity. It's why people that make their bed every single morning have a greater tendency to stick to a budget in their personal finances and to eat healthy throughout the day. It has nothing to do with making your bed, has everything to do with starting your day with a task completed. And so what's that thing? What's the one thing that if you would do it every single day, it would create disproportionate order in other areas of your life? Like, answer that question and then apply yourself to it. Put yourself in order, and don't be surprised when that makes you into more of the type of person that can go to work with the right posture.
What's the third principle?
Okay, so the first one was health and growth are not the same thing. The second one was if you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. The third one is a quote about leadership. And I'll never forget where I first heard this quote. It's a guy that we've recently become reconnected with. And man, it's a prayer of mine. And it's something that we're actively having conversations about, is having him on this podcast and on this YouTube channel. His name is Clint Bruce. He's a retired Navy SEAL. The guy is just such a stud. And it was my first ever leadership development event that I've ever organized. Was over 10 years ago now. And I was help running this organization called Spur Leadership that I talked about earlier. And I'll never forget, we brought in this guest speaker, Clint Bruce. He was from Dallas, and he was going to come in and talk about his Navy SEAL stories and teach on leadership. And I'll never forget, this guy has just like an imposing presence about him. He is like, I don't even think a big guy is the right word to use. The right word that I would use for Clint is dense. Like, he is just a dense individual.
Nice.
And you're like, man, that's the type of guy that, like, if you accidentally knock into him, not only do you notice it, you're probably on the floor. Like, he is just he is just the way that I picture Navy SEALs looking is Clint Bruce, right? And I'll just never forget the way that he started off this talk. He said, I want all of you to listen to me. And then he just kind of like scanned the room, made eye contact with everyone, and he put himself in this position where, for me, I'm fresh out of college, and I'm like, this dude is talking to me right now. He is and
captivated.
Dude. And isn't just talking to me. He is talking to my soul at this moment. And he just says, with a high degree of poignancy, he says, if someone depends on you, then you are a leader. And I can just look back to that moment. I can say, like, that single sentence has shaped my career, right? Because I'm certain I had thoughts and ideas about leadership up till then that were faulty and flawed, right? Maybe leadership is authority, means that it's rooted in a position or a title. Maybe I thought that leadership was authority. Maybe I thought it was power, right? Your ability to just tell people what to do, right? And in reality, what he was saying is leadership actually depends very little on authority or power. Leadership is much more reliant on influence. And what he was saying is, really, if you look around you and there are people that depend on you, which that is the case, unless you live under a rock somewhere, that is absolutely true. People depend on you. Then you are a leader. So then the question really isn't, are you a leader? The question is, are you leading? And that changes everything. And what's so crazy to me is I can say this now because it applied to me back then, but it applies to the people that we work with every single day now. And it's the reason why I lean on this quote for almost every keynote that I give. If someone depends on you, you are a leader. I want people to hear me say that over and over and over again, because here's what I've seen to be true. The single greatest limiting lid to people effectively leading, almost always, is their inability to view themselves as a leader. And if you don't view yourself as a leader, like, you're not going to lead well. The minute you start saying, man, I have leadership responsibility, well, then you also like start to adopt leadership opportunity. And man, then all bets are off. But that's the phrase that we've been saying. And quite frankly, I've been saying ever since that time 10 years ago, if someone depends on you, then you are a leader.
We talked about this a few episodes ago when we went through Proverbs, but that idea of wisdom and like, what is wisdom? Like, what does it look like to lead in wisdom? And I mean, Proverbs says, right, the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And I think like having a right view of who God is, because I mean, that's what fear of the Lord is. It's not being afraid of who God is. It's having a reverence and understanding of who he is. And having a right understanding of who God is gives us a right understanding of who we are. And I think that just goes into what you're saying, right? Like leading with a right view of who you are and like the impact that you can have on other people.
I heard this once, and it was an illustration that was done with an umbrella. And it basically said, so many people live, we're on video now, so we can do this, with the umbrella hanging out here, right? And the storms of life come and all these decisions that they have to make and all this leadership responsibility that they're trying to hold. And they're holding the umbrella out here. And what is the umbrella? The umbrella is the umbrella of authority, right? They have said, I am all sufficient in myself. I make the decisions. I make the call. This all belongs to me, right? You're holding the umbrella of authority out to the side and you're saying, I've got this, right? What are we called to do? Well, when we stand with an umbrella over us, here's the principle. If you want to get over what God has put under you, you have to get under what God has put over you. And what's so neat about this is it applies to the authority of God being over us and saying, man, fear of the Lord, like you said, right? Like, I'm going to apply all reverence and respect to God's wisdom for leading. But then also, man, that concept of the umbrella of authority was critically important for me when I wasn't the business owner. And I reported to people that were honoring God right? And they were focused on glorifying God. They just had different opinions than I did. And man, it can be hard to learn these lessons, but there's a proper place for respecting and honoring authority in the right way.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about that third point?
Well, I would challenge people, create a culture that defines leadership in that way on your team, right? So, maybe that's a message you need to hear. If someone depends on you, then you are a leader. Maybe you're like, man, I kind of already feel like I've got my leadership responsibility and opportunity. Well, then maybe you need to tell your team that. Maybe you need to tell your spouse that. Maybe you need to tell your kids that, right? That there are people that need to hear. I've seen this over and over again. If someone depends on you, you are a leader. And what's crazy is sometimes you will tell the right person that and a light bulb will go off for them. And I mean, it can change the trajectory of their life in so many ways because they start to take on that responsibility that they always had. They just never took in some ways.
Yeah.
So that's the final thing that I would say there.
That's actually like one of the reasons why I ended up joining the military was just like a single comment from a friend that I really respected at the time. And
wow,
like,
what was the comment?
It seems it's going to seem so arbitrary and so ridiculous, but like just spoke into me in a way that like I hadn't really, I think, experienced in the past from even my peers. And I was going to community college at the time. I decided to stay at home and just get my associate's degree and then figure out what it was that I wanted to do next. And I had a couple ideas of like what I wanted that to be. But while I was there after high school, really got into fitness and started to work out more. And I was working at a Smoothie King for a little bit. So, you got to throw them back the protein shakes. And, but I met a guy, he was in a Bible study with me. He was in the Marines and we would work out multiple times a week together. And it was a great friendship. And yeah, at one point, I don't remember what it was, the workout that we were doing, but it was something that involved, it was like a lot of pull-ups and a lot of also like running, but then we were also lifting weights. It was like a very dynamic workout, kind of what you would expect, like military, like functional fitness, the HIIT, CrossFit, like that kind of environment, or that kind of philosophy behind fitness. And I like finished a set of pull-ups and I turn around and he just looks at me. He's just like, dude, have you ever thought being a Navy SEAL? He's like, you're like really fit. Like you can really like throw up some really good numbers. And it was just funny. It was like this one comment from this friend that I at that point, like really respected, especially when it came to fitness and like look up to, just said that one thing. And that was like, oh, like I see a capability in you that like I personally didn't see. And it's funny. Like I started to play around with the idea of like, oh yeah, like what would it look like if I joined the military? Like, is that really something that I could do? And I mean, one thing led to another, and I didn't join the Navy. I joined the Coast Guard instead, but still pursued like a difficult elite training and completed it. And it's just amazing to see that really just changed the trajectory of my life in so many ways. And it's like the seed to that, or really maybe the seed was already there, but like the spark was just like an affirmation from someone that I looked up to.
Isn't that wild? There's so much in that I think we could unpack. But part of it though, I think that story to me highlights two things that we should all be doing is like, number one, be a competent person, right? Like be the type of person that other people admire. Because like if that dude was a slob that you were eating cheeseburgers with every Tuesday and Thursday, right? That didn't have his act together. And then he like suddenly said, have you thought about being a Navy SEAL? It's like that probably doesn't have the same effect on you, right? It's like, this was a person that you looked up to. Like he had his act together. He had put himself in order in some ways. And so that like, it's crazy how the more competent we become, the better we become at the things God has given us to do. It's like the more weight our words carry in arenas and avenues that might not even be related to our competency, right? Proverbs says your gift will make room for you in some ways. And so it's like he was exceptionally confident. But then the other thing I would say that people need to remember is like become confident at your thing, because in some ways that earns you the ability to be listened to. But then the second thing that I think is really important is that I have seen this play out so many times. there will be seasons and there will be times where people, there are people in your circle of influence right now that need to borrow some of your belief.
Yeah.
Right? Like all of us. That guy is a great story. It was like, he believed more about you than you believed in yourself. And he phrased it as a question, is the crazy thing. Like, have you ever thought about this? And man, I can think of story after story where people did that for me. And it would be such a shame if each of us would say, man, there were people who believed in me more than I believed in myself. And that brought me to where I am today. And then we didn't turn around and do that for other people. Like, I think we are actually called to let people borrow some of our belief about them.
Yeah. So number 3 was, if someone depends on you, you're a leader. What's the 4th principle?
Okay. The 4th one also has a little bit of a setup to it. So we were interviewing John Eldredge on the previous podcast that I hosted, which was the Entre Leadership podcast at Dave Ramsey's company. And I was interviewing John Eldredge. John Eldredge is probably most known for Wild at Heart, but had just written a book around COVID time. He wrote this pre-COVID, but then it was released around COVID, called Turn Down the Noise or something like that. Pretty prophetic book, right? I don't know how it sold because people were pretty tuned into the noise around COVID, unfortunately, right? But this is actually a great example of what we just talked about. John Eldredge's words are good. He's a brilliant writer and communicator. His affect gives his words so much more weight. Like, have you seen a video of John Eldredge before?
No, I've read Wild at Heart, but I haven't.
Dude, the way I've heard many pastors talk about the impact that it made on them to spend time with Dallas Willard and with Eugene Peterson. Like, I've heard multiple very well-known pastors talk about man, just spending time with them was just different in some ways. It was just a different experience, and not necessarily because of what they said, just because of the weight of who they were. And you're with someone that has such a presence about them because they have this quiet and calm assurance of someone that spent a lot of time with Jesus, is what I would say. And I obviously have never spent time with Dallas Willard or Eugene Peterson, but the way people talk about them is the way I felt around John Eldredge, which is credit to him and compliment to him. So it was just a really cool interview in so many ways. But I remember asking him at one time, right? That's a podcast particularly focused on business owners. I remember asking him, I said, John, you're a business owner, you run a nonprofit organization, and I think it's really possible if someone owns the business for them to equate too much of their identity with what they do. Like, they interweave their identity and their performance in a way that can actually be very detrimental to them and maybe even detrimental to the people they lead. And I think it's a problem. And so I just would love for you to speak on that a little bit. I thought I had framed a pretty original, solid question, and was really eager to hopefully hear him say, "That's a good question, Alex." What he said immediately, didn't skip a beat, and maybe lost a little bit of his peaceful affect. She's like, "You think it's a problem, Alex? You think it's a problem?" He's like, "No, I know for sure it's a problem." And I was like, okay, well, there goes my, I thought I had this great original thought, right? But then he said the thing that has become the phrase that I now love sharing with people is, he said, every single person listening to this podcast needs to regularly and repeatedly hear, remember, and internalize, your work is not who you are. Your work is where you serve. And just the way he said it, but then also just the weight of that message, right? Your work is not who you are. And we live in a culture today that is regularly and repeatedly trying to tell us that who you are is your work. You are what you produce. And he said, man, that is not at all the gospel of Jesus Christ. Your work is not who you are. Your work is where you go to serve people. Your work is where you go to love people. Your work is where you go to bring your gifts and your talents, all the value of who you are, and to pour it out in the best interest of other people, which is a radical paradigm shift that I like repeating it because I need to hear it over and over and over again. One
of the things that, we do every week in our one-on-ones for Path for Growth is success statements. And we read yellow, green. And one of the cool things that I've seen is just your reiteration that, hey, we're not red, yellow, greening you. We're red, yellow, greening where your role is currently at, where we're at, like in those success statements, in those goals.
And I like that you bring up that example, because in the Sermon on the Mount, it says, "Judge not that you be not judged, for with the judgment you use, you yourself will be judged." And I think that is probably, when Jesus said that, he's probably talking about God's eternal role as judge and the arbiter of justice, right? And that I shouldn't condemn you because of one moment in time. And certainly that's true. But practically, what I often experience is, if I equate you with your results, and if I say Ben is red, right? Well, then it's almost like subconsciously, I can't not apply the same standard to me. Mm-hmm. And that is a very anxiety inducing thing. It's way better as a leader to say, man, in God's eyes, I am seen through the lens of Christ's grace, right? And I am seen through the lens of Jesus's righteousness. That's how God sees me. And my job is to receive grace, repent from any sin that I'm actively engaging in, and then move forward. And in that, I'm green, right? I am I don't think God is red, yellow, greening us, but I am deemed as a child of God. And out of that, I get to go do good work, but I have the grace even for when I make mistakes. But none of the work is who I am. It's just what I do. It's where I serve. And when I internalize that about myself, well, that absolutely affects the way I engage in my one-on-one meetings with direct reports. And because I can praise God and know that I am not my results, I don't have to equate you with your results either. We can just put your results on the table and we can talk about them honestly. And then we can say, okay, what do we need to do to move our reds to yellows and our yellows to greens?
What's some practical advice you could give to someone who right now they see where they place their identity and their work kind of intertwined, and they don't really know how to separate those things?
Well, I would say, confess is what I would say, at which, I think I pause there because honestly, it can be really easy to go into tactics, right? And it can be really easy to be like, go find someone that can just encourage you just for who you are. Go write down what you think is true, or, go read God's promises for what is true. And I think all of those things have their place. Go find a counselor, right? That can help you detach your work from who you are. What I believe is true, though, is ultimately our desire to equate our work to who we are is goes all the way back to the very beginning, right? The fall is people wanting to make the story about themselves. And when we say my work is who I am, we adopt an I've got this attitude, which is no different than Adam and Eve in the garden. I don't need God. I've got this. This is not only is this what I do, this is who I am. And I can be everything that is needed in this situation. I can be omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent in this situation. What's crazy though is that works really well when things are going really well. And people will praise you, people will applaud you, but then the minute things don't go well, which they will, it will crush you. And you have now not just had a bad day at work, you have lost your identity as well. And so what I would say is, if you're like me, it can be really helpful to engage in confession with God in prayer and just say, man, I have way, way, way over prioritized approval of man, productivity, and image. And for that, I don't make excuses. I need forgiveness. And then what I would say is, oftentimes the healing part of confession involves both inviting God into the conversation, but then inviting other people you trust into the conversation. And this is true not even just of confessing this thing, but when you can tell someone that loves you the thing that you're ashamed of, or the thing that you can't believe you did, or you can't believe you're struggling with this, when you can tell them that and they say, I love you, and I know God forgives you for this, and I forgive you as well, you will start to actually believe that you are not what you do, right? But I mean, in some ways, that in itself is an act of faith because you've got to say the thing and you've got to see the person's eyes looking at you. And for them to say, I understand that you did that thing. It's a good thing that's not who you are. Because I think it's in that practice of confession and repentance, which is to turn around, that we receive grace and we start to reestablish our identity, not in who we are and what we can do, but who God is and who he made us to be.
All right. What's the last one?
So the fifth one is one that like truly is foundational for our company. I'll say it and then I'll give the backstory for it. So the principle is strength is for service. We've done the audio podcast now for 4.5 years, right? And we've been saying this at the end of every podcast, I think since we started, right? It's a core value of our company, right? Strength is for service. And the story of where that came from is we shared on a previous episode that the decision to leave Ramsey coincided really with like the code red COVID season, right? And I'll never forget, it was before I had actually made the decision to leave. I was still working at Ramsey, and COVID, it was the day that COVID became like a very real thing in the United States. And I'll never forget that they called a full team meeting at Ramsey, and they deemed it important enough that they said, we want everyone to come down to the auditorium and just stand apart from each other. But we're going to bring everyone was already at work, right? So we were all in the same building. And man, maybe one day we do a like Dave Ramsey leadership stories episode, because this was one moment of many moments that I just witnessed extraordinary leadership for situations where there wasn't a playbook, right? Like no one knew what they were doing at that time. And you really saw the character of people. And I'll never forget, Dave got up on stage in front of all 1,000 people and he said, let's pray. That's how he started, right? And it was a very genuine prayer of like, we do not know what's going to happen here, but we trust you, was essentially what he was praying at that time. And then he just proceeded to very calmly, in a very cool, non-anxious way, share the state of the company, share the financial realities of the company, share the trajectory of the company, share the potential effects of what might happen, share some of the models that he and the leadership team had run out of like worst case scenario, expected scenario, best case scenario, and then talk about the role that everyone in the room had to play. And it was not a rah-rah meeting. We did not leave there saying, let's go charge. Like that was not it at all. It was like a very, like we prayed to close and then we left. And it was just very, in some ways, solemn. But I remember thinking as I was leaving, like, man, I bet there's a lot of people that are leaving this room right now that not by product of anything he said. All he said was the truth. Just by product of where they're at right now, they're probably very worried. Like, I bet there's a lot of people in this room that are extremely worried. And I just found myself saying, man, from a personal financial perspective, I'm in good shape. My family is healthy and well. I feel good there. I have really strong community in Tennessee right now, which hasn't always been the case, but was at that time. And I'm very grateful for that. And like, I literally just like left feeling grateful. Like, man, if we're going to go through this season, I'm very grateful that I'm in the season that I'm in. And the next morning, I just was kind of continuing in that spirit of gratitude. And I had woken up and was literally just journaling like, okay, let's put some actual words to this. Like, what are all the things that I'm grateful for? And literally like wrote, like, I just feel strong. Like, I feel grateful for how strong I am in all of these areas. And just wrote all those things down. And then it was in that context that what I was doing for my Bible study at that time was I was reading a passage from the New Testament in the ESV. And then after reading the ESV, I would read it, the Message version of it. And I was in Romans 15 at this time. And I had just done all my journaling on everything I was grateful for. And then I am grateful that I feel strong. I'm grateful for strength in this season of turbulence. Flip over to the Bible, read the ESV of Romans 15, and then read the Message version. And I'm reading the Message version of Romans 15, and smack dab in the middle of the passage, it says, strength is for service. And I mean, I still get chills telling this story. I got chills at that exact moment. I think I actually had tears in my eyes at that moment. And I literally looked over and I had this page of all these areas where I was strong. And now I had something to do with it. And what's pretty wild is we started doing out of that. I literally just asked the question, what are people really going to struggle with in this season? And it was obvious people are going to struggle socially and with community in this season. So we started I just put out on Facebook that we were going to do Thursday night Strength is for Service calls on Zoom. And I was like, I don't know if anyone will show up. And I'll be darned, like 50 people showed up to the first time.
I'm seeing a trend here.
Dude, apparently my strategy for life is, if you feel like there's a need, like start a Zoom call and see what happens, right? And I mean, we did that thing. I think we did it for 15 weeks and we had a whole team. I'll never forget Susan. She was like our admin for the team. It was all this like just purpose, and it was just intentional conversation, all of that. There was very little organization to it from my side of things, but it was just such a good reminder of in that season of like, man, all of us, regardless of what you're going through right now, there is at least one area in your life where you are strong, right? Maybe it's financially, maybe it's socially, maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in your relationship with your kids, maybe it's intellectually, maybe it's physically, right? There is something in your life right now where you are strong. And like, man, you better recognize that strength is not for you, right? Like you were not given that to hoard, right? The reason why you were given that is not for yourself. It's for others, right? Your strength is for service. And what's so cool is that even when, I would even say, especially when you're going through a tough time, if you can readopt the posture of, man, there's things that I have that I should be grateful for, and those things I should be using to serve others, it's wild how fast you will forget about your quote unquote tough time. And you point your eyes out towards contributing to other people. And I just think what you experience in that moment is what you were made for, is what I would say. So all that to say, that phrase, strength is for service, is something that we say within our community of leaders over and over and over again.
Is there anything else you want to say before we close out?
Well, I'd love to review, right? Health and growth are not the same thing. If you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. If someone depends on you, then you are a leader. Your work is not who you are. Your work is where you serve. And on the backside of that, your strength is for service. So I would say, man, I think those principles are universally applicable. I actually believe that. But then also beyond that, I would tell anyone that's a leader on this call, which by the way, if someone depends on you, you are a leader. Man, it doesn't have to be those principles. Find some principles, apply some language to it, because it's so easy to say the same thing a billion different ways. It would be better for you to adopt language that's portable and memorable, and for you to say that over and over again. And just remember that language creates culture. So we'd charge people to do this on their own. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. If you want more content like this, we've got some killer stuff planned. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Let's go, let's go, let's go.